Theories about the world before the flood. Let's start with 4 theories so you can understand what was and still is said about the pre-flood world. Afterward, we'll talk about this event based on the Bible. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. If you haven't seen the video about Noah's flood here on the channel, make sure to watch it after this one. Now, let's dive in. 1. Advanced civilizations. Many traditions and theories suggest that the pre-flood period was marked by technologically and culturally advanced civilizations. Although the Bible does not provide specific details about the sophistication of societies at the time, there are indications that humanity was already organized into cities and had developed certain technologies. Descendants of Cain in the early trades. In Genesis 4 verses 17 to 22, there is mention of Cain's descendants who specialized in various trades. Jabal is described as the father of those who live in tents and raise livestock, while Jubal is identified as the father of all who play the harp and flute, indicating the emergence of music. Additionally, Tubal-Cain is mentioned as a master in the art of metallurgy, capable of forging tools and weapons from bronze and iron. These accounts suggest that pre-flood civilization had already achieved a certain degree of cultural and technological development, with skills in construction, agriculture, animal husbandry, and toolmaking. Theories of lost civilizations. Although not directly in the biblical scriptures, some theorists suggest that pre-flood humanity may have had access to advanced technologies, which were destroyed in the flood. The idea of highly developed civilizations before the flood is popular in various ancient cultures. Plato, for example, wrote about the civilization of Atlantis, which supposedly disappeared in a great cataclysm. Some scholars speculate that the myth of Atlantis could have its roots in a cultural memory of the pre-flood world. 2. Long life expectancy. One of the most notable aspects of the pre-flood period is the extreme longevity of the early humans. According to Genesis, the patriarchs who lived before the flood had incredibly long lifespans, with some reaching almost 1,000 years of age. Adam lived 930 years. Methuselah, the oldest man in the Bible, lived 969 years, and Noah was 600 years old when the flood occurred. Interpretations of longevity. Some scholars see these long lives as literal, while others suggest they might be symbolic, representing the greatness of the patriarchs or serving as metaphors for periods of influence. Another interpretation is that, before the flood, Earth's environmental conditions were more favorable for long life, perhaps with a more protective atmosphere or a more stable climate. Impact of longevity on civilization. If these long lives are interpreted literally, they would have allowed people to accumulate vast knowledge and skills throughout their lives. This could explain the rapid cultural and technological development mentioned earlier. People living for hundreds of years would have more time to explore, invent, and perfect their abilities. 3. Pre-flood culture and religion. Although the Bible does not go into great detail about the cultural and religious practices of the pre-flood period, some elements can be inferred, and other sources, such as the Book of Enoch, provide additional insights. Idolatry and witchcraft. There are indications that the pre-flood world, especially the descendants of Cain, practiced forms of idolatry and witchcraft, turning away from the worship of God. This is suggested by the widespread corruption mentioned in Genesis and corroborated by texts like the Book of Enoch, which speak about the introduction of forbidden practices by fallen angels. These practices corrupted not only human relationships but also spirituality, promoting cults and rituals that displease God. Possible pious religious practices. In contrast, the lineage of Seth is seen as preserving true faith in God, although over time, even this lineage became partially corrupted as the sons of God intermarried with the daughters of men. Before this, however, there seems to have been an effort to maintain pious religious practices, such as sacrifices to God, exemplified by Abel's offering, which pleased God. The concept of sacrifice and worship of God was likely an important element in the lives of Seth's descendants. 4. The lost civilization of Atlantis and other legends. Many cultures around the world have legends about a great cataclysm that destroyed advanced civilizations before our current era. Atlantis, described by Plato, is one of these mythical civilizations, and its destruction by a great flood is often associated with the biblical event. While Plato located Atlantis in the Mediterranean, the idea of an advanced civilization that mysteriously disappeared resonates with the flood narrative. In addition to Atlantis, many other cultures, including those in Mesopotamia, South America, and Asia, have myths about floods and destroyed civilizations, suggesting that the idea of a great cataclysm may have roots in ancient memories shared by diverse cultures. The pre-flood world is a narrative rooted in biblical and mythological traditions, widely associated with the book of Genesis in the Bible, as well as with accounts from various cultures around the world. This story covers events from the creation of the world to the great flood that, according to the biblical account, wiped out all of humanity except Noah, his family, and the animals he saved. In this context, we will explore the key events that marked this period, as detailed in the suggested topics. The story of the pre-flood world begins with God's creation of the universe, as reported in the first chapter of Genesis. God, in 6 days, created the heavens, the earth, the seas, the plants, the animals, and finally man. Man, named Adam, was formed from the dust of the earth and given life through the divine breath. Shortly afterward, God created woman Eve from one of Adam's ribs to be his companion. The first home of humanity was the Garden of Eden, a place of harmony where Adam and Eve had a direct connection with God. They were commanded to tend to the garden and not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This order was essential for their obedience to God, establishing a covenant of trust and dependence on the Creator. However, the serpent, described as a cunning creature, deceived Eve, and she ended up eating the forbidden fruit, also offering it to Adam, who likewise disobeyed. This event is known as the fall of man, marking the entry of sin into the world. As a consequence, they were expelled from Eden and condemned to face mortality, suffering, and hard labor. This is the starting point of humanity's degradation, which would culminate in the Great Flood. Life outside Eden was harsh for Adam and Eve, who now experienced the difficulties of the world. They had 2 sons, Cain and Abel. Abel became a shepherd and Cain a farmer. Both offered sacrifices to God, but God favored Abel's offering more. This caused jealousy in Cain, who, driven by envy, murdered Abel, marking the first homicide in human history. As punishment, Cain was cursed by God and forced to live as a wanderer. However, God also promised to protect him, placing a mark on Cain so that no one would kill him. Thus, Cain departed to the east, founding the first known city. From him, a lineage marked by rebellion and moral degradation began. After the tragedy with Abel, Adam and Eve had another son named Seth, and it was through him that the godly lineage of humanity continued. The descendants of Seth would be responsible for preserving faith in God, in contrast to Cain's descendants, who were deeply corrupted. Humanity expanded rapidly, and the first civilizations began to emerge. On one side, there was Seth's godly lineage, representing those who followed divine precepts. On the other, Cain's lineage, which increasingly distanced itself from God, building societies based on violence, corruption, and wickedness. This division between the 2 groups is symbolized by the contrast between the attitudes of Cain's and Seth's descendants. Cain's lineage was notorious for its moral corruption, while Seth's lineage tried to maintain a righteous life in God's eyes. However, over time, even the godly lineage began to intermingle with the corrupt one, intensifying humanity's moral degeneration. Human corruption reached its peak when the sons of God, a term with various interpretations, possibly referring to fallen angels or Seth's godly lineage, began marrying the daughters of men, often associated with Cain's lineage. This intermarriage resulted in the emergence of the Nephilim, described as giants or men of renown. The Nephilim are an enigmatic figure in the scriptures, frequently associated with beings of great stature and power, and their presence exacerbated the violence and chaos in the pre-flood world. As humanity plunged deeper into sin, the world became a place of widespread violence, cruelty, and immorality. Genesis describes how God observed the corruption and wickedness of humans, and how their hearts were continually inclined toward evil. This bleak scenario led God to make a drastic decision. The Nephilim are enigmatic and controversial figures in the biblical narrative, mentioned mainly in chapter 6 of the book of Genesis. Although their presence in the scriptures is brief, they have fascinated scholars, theologians, and mythologists for centuries. The description of the Nephilim is shrouded in mystery, and different interpretations have been offered over time. Here is a more detailed view of who the Nephilim were and how they fit into the pre-flood world. The term Nephilim is mentioned in Genesis 6 verse 4, which states the following: "When men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, 'My spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown.'" In this passage, the Nephilim are described as men of renown and heroes of old present on earth when the sons of God married the daughters of men. However, the biblical text offers few additional details, leaving their origin and nature open to interpretation. There are several interpretations of who the Nephilim were, and these views vary depending on religious tradition and scholars. Below are some of the most common theories. The most common translation of the Hebrew word Nephilim is fallen, derived from the root naphal, meaning to fall. However, many versions of the Bible, such as the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, translate the term as giants. This interpretation is widely accepted in Jewish and Christian tradition. The Nephilim are seen as beings of colossal size and extraordinary strength, possibly responsible for heroic deeds, but also associated with corruption and violence. This image of powerful giants is reinforced in other biblical texts, such as Numbers 13:33, where the spies sent by Moses to Canaan report seeing the descendants of the Nephilim, describing them as giants that made the Israelites feel like grasshoppers next to them. Another popular interpretation is that the Nephilim were the result of the union between the sons of God and the daughters of men. But who were these sons of God? There are two main views on this question. According to this interpretation, the sons of God were fallen angels, that is, spiritual beings who disobeyed God and descended to earth to take human wives. The union between these celestial beings and human women would have produced the Nephilim, who were a hybrid race of giants and powerful beings. This view is supported by extra-biblical texts, such as the Book of Enoch, which details the fall of a group of angels called Watchers, who rebelled against God and descended to earth, joining with women and producing giant offspring. Another interpretation sees the sons of God as the pious descendants of Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve. According to this view, the sons of God would represent the righteous lineage of Seth, while the daughters of men would be descendants of the corrupt lineage of Cain. The mixing of these two lineages would have resulted in a morally depraved and violent generation, symbolized by the Nephilim. In some ancient Jewish and Christian traditions, the Nephilim are seen as beings with supernatural powers, not only in terms of physical strength, but also in terms of intelligence and mystical abilities. This view places them on a level close to demigods, intermediary beings between humans and deities, something similar to the heroic figures of Greek mythology, such as Hercules or Achilles. In the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim are described as evil giants who brought destruction to the world. They also introduced humanity to forbidden knowledge, teaching arts like metallurgy, sorcery, and the use of weapons, which further contributed to the corruption of the earth. The presence of the Nephilim is often associated with the increasing wickedness and moral corruption in the pre-flood world. As humanity became more violent and depraved, God decided to intervene and destroy the earth with the flood. Many scholars believe that the presence of the Nephilim was one of the factors that accelerated this decision, as their existence seemed to represent a direct violation of divine order. It is important to note that in Genesis 6 verse 4, the text states that the Nephilim were present in those days and also afterward. This suggests that even after the flood, the Nephilim or their descendants continued to exist in some form. This is corroborated in Numbers 13:33, where the Israelite spies report the presence of giants in the land of Canaan, leading some to believe that the Nephilim somehow survived the flood or reappeared later. Although the Book of Enoch is not part of the biblical canon in many Christian and Jewish traditions, it is an important work for understanding the narrative of the Nephilim, written probably between the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC. The Book of Enoch offers a detailed explanation of the Watchers, a group of fallen angels who descended to earth and united with human women. These angels taught humanity forbidden knowledge and fathered the Nephilim, who brought destruction to the world. In the Book of Enoch, the Nephilim are portrayed as a terrible threat to the order created by God, and the flood is sent as a measure to eradicate this corruption. The Nephilim remain an intriguing figure in the pre-flood account, surrounded by mystery and speculation, whether as physical giants, descendants of fallen angels, or as a symbolic representation of human corruption. The Nephilim are seen as an essential part of why the flood was necessary to purify the earth. Their legend continues to inspire theological and academic debates, as well as feature in various cultural and mythological traditions. God then decided to cleanse the earth and start over, but not without first giving an opportunity for redemption. He chose Noah, a man described as righteous and blameless in his generation, to build an ark and save a remnant of creation. Noah received detailed instructions from God on how to build the ark, which was to be large enough to house his family and a sample of all the animals of the earth. Over a long period, Noah and his sons worked on constructing the ark. Meanwhile, Noah preached to the people, warning them of the impending judgment. However, humanity, immersed in its corruption, ignored his warnings and continued in its wicked ways. When the ark was ready, God commanded Noah to gather a pair of every kind of animal, along with 7 pairs of clean animals to be preserved. Noah's family, consisting of his wife, his 3 sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives, entered the ark, awaiting the onset of the flood. The flood was a global event of great proportions. Waters fell from the heavens, and the springs of the deep burst forth, covering the entire earth. For 40 days and 40 nights, the rain flooded the planet, destroying all forms of life except those on the ark. The flood was not just a natural catastrophe, but a divine intervention, intended to cleanse the earth of human corruption and offer a new beginning. The pre-flood civilization came to an end, and the world was forever transformed. Only Noah, his family, and the animals on the ark survived the devastation. After months, the waters began to recede, and the ark finally rested on Mount Ararat. Noah and his family descended from the ark and offered sacrifices of gratitude to God. As a sign of his promise never to destroy the earth again with a flood, God made a covenant with Noah, and the rainbow was given as a symbol of this covenant. From Noah's descendants, humanity was restored, and the story continued. Noah and his sons became the ancestors of the nations that would populate the earth, and from them, the post-flood civilizations began to emerge. The account of the flood serves as a reminder of both divine justice and mercy, marking the end of one era and the beginning of a new journey for humanity. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your opinion, and like the video. Thank you.